My wife cheated on me with her best friend, so I pretended to forgive her and destroyed their lives. I never imagined I'd be writing something like this. I've read hundreds of stories here thinking, wow, that's awful, but believing it could never happen to me. Yet here I am, sitting alone in my car after midnight, typing this because I can't sleep and I don't know who else to talk to. I, 35 male, have been married to my wife, Amber, 34 female, for 9 years. We've been together on and off since we were teenagers. She was my first serious girlfriend. We broke up in college because of distance and young stupidity, but we reconnected in our 20s when we ran into each other at a wedding. We moved fast, dating again, engaged within a year, married a year after that. Everyone said we were a fairy tale couple who were always meant to end up together. We have a 6-year-old daughter who is the brightest part of my life. She's the reason I'm still here, still trying to keep some semblance of stability while everything is falling apart. Amber has always been outgoing. She's got dozens of friends from every chapter of her life. High school, college, work. I'm more introverted. I have a tight circle of friends and prefer spending evenings at home. But I never resented her social life. If anything, I admired how easily she connected with people. One of her oldest friends is Tyler, 36 male. They met in college during a semester abroad in Spain. When we first started dating again, she told me he was basically like a brother. I didn't love the idea of them being so close, but I wasn't going to be the controlling husband telling her who she could talk to. I trusted her. For years, Tyler was around here and there. He came to our wedding, sent Christmas cards, sometimes joined group dinners or birthday parties. He never crossed any obvious lines, at least, not that I saw. But about a year ago, I started to notice Amber changing. It was subtle at first. She'd be on her phone late at night, smiling at the screen, then quickly locking it when I walked by. She started putting her phone face down on the table, something she never did before. Then she announced she was getting serious about her health and signed up for a gym membership. Again, not suspicious in itself. She's always been pretty active. But she started going every single evening. She bought all new workout clothes and special protein powders. At first, I supported it. I'd tell her she looked great and that I was proud of her. But soon, the gym trips started coinciding with her being unreachable for hours. I'd text, and she'd reply hours later with a generic, "Just finishing up, be home soon." Around the same time, our intimacy took a nosedive. She stopped wanting to be close. When I tried to hug her, she'd stiffen up. If I asked if something was wrong, she'd get irritated and say she was tired or stressed from work. I kept telling myself it was just a rough patch. I thought maybe she was going through something she didn't want to talk about yet. But in my gut, I knew something was wrong. One night, she fell asleep on the couch and her phone buzzed on the coffee table. Without thinking, I picked it up. The lock screen showed a preview of a message. Tyler, I wish you were here with me right now. I can't stop thinking about last night. I felt my heart hammering in my chest. I didn't open it. I just set the phone down and walked into the kitchen because I thought I might throw up. That was the moment I stopped pretending everything was fine. I didn't confront her that night. I don't even fully understand why. Part of me was terrified of what she'd say if I asked her outright. Part of me wanted to believe it was somehow innocent, though deep down I already knew the truth. Instead, I decided to watch and wait. The next morning, she acted like nothing was wrong. She kissed me on the cheek and made our daughter breakfast. She chatted about her plans for the day, errands, groceries, maybe stopping by the gym again. I nodded along, pretending everything was normal. After she left, I sat down and started making a list of every suspicious thing that had happened over the last year. The sudden obsession with going to the gym every evening, the new lingerie she never wore for me, the unexplained credit card charges, the late-night texts, and the phone turned face down. The way she flinched when I tried to be close. I felt like an idiot for not adding it up sooner. That day, I ordered a small voice recorder online. It was the kind you can hide in a car or a gym bag. I had never in my life thought I'd become the kind of husband who spied on his wife, but I told myself I deserved to know the truth. The recorder arrived 2 days later. My hands were shaking as I slipped it into the side pocket of her gym bag before she left for her evening workout. I spent the next 3 hours pacing the living room, waiting for her to come home. When she walked in, she was smiling. She kissed me on the cheek and went to take a shower. I could barely meet her eyes. After she went to bed, I retrieved the recorder and listened to the file with my heart in my throat. Most of it was just ambient noise. But about 20 minutes in, I heard her get into a car. Then, a man's voice, Tyler's. I'll never forget the way he said her name. Soft, like they were alone in the world. Then he laughed and said, "God, I've missed you." I stopped the recording. My hands were trembling so hard I could hardly hold the device. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering when everything had gone so wrong. Over the next 2 weeks, I kept gathering evidence. I followed her once, staying far enough back that she wouldn't notice. She didn't go to the gym. She went to a cheap hotel near the highway. I watched her car pull in, and a few minutes later, Tyler's car arrived. They didn't come out for almost 2 hours. I took photos. I felt sick to my stomach as I did it, but I knew I couldn't keep living in denial. I started thinking about what this would mean for our daughter. I thought about how if I confronted Amber and she denied everything, she might try to twist the story. I needed proof that no one could dispute. So I kept collecting it. Screenshots of messages, photos of their cars parked side by side, the recording of their conversation. A log of every time she lied about where she was. Every day, it felt like another piece of me died. But the worst part was pretending to be the loving husband while my world was crumbling. I still did the bedtime stories and made dinner. I still laughed at our daughter's jokes. I still texted Amber during the day, acting like everything was normal. I was determined that if she was going to betray me, I wasn't going to let her see me break. About a month after I started gathering evidence, Amber told me she was going to spend the weekend with her friend Maya a couple towns over. She said they were doing a spa weekend to relax. I nodded, like I believed her. But as soon as she left, I called Maya, who I'd met a few times. She sounded confused and said she hadn't seen Amber in months. That was the final confirmation I needed. After I hung up with Maya, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at nothing. My mind felt blank, but underneath the numbness, there was a cold fury I'd never experienced before. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This wasn't a drunken lapse of judgment. This was deliberate, calculated betrayal, over and over, for months. She'd looked me in the face and lied so convincingly that I had doubted my own sanity. I realized that confronting her in private would only give her a chance to spin it, to cry, to beg, to tell me it didn't mean anything. I'd seen too many stories of cheaters rewriting history the second they got caught. I wanted there to be no escape. That evening, after putting our daughter to bed, I took out my laptop and started compiling everything into a single folder. The photos of her and Tyler entering and leaving the motel, the screenshots of texts, the audio recordings, the phone logs, the financial statements showing the hotel charges. I backed it up to a cloud drive and emailed a copy to myself, plus a trusted friend. If she tried to delete anything or deny it, I'd still have proof. Then I called my lawyer. He'd been helping me quietly prepare in case I decided to file for divorce. I told him I was ready. He explained that in our state, infidelity could impact the division of marital assets, but not necessarily custody. He advised me to keep calm and not tip her off. I also called my father-in-law, who I've always been close to. He's a no-nonsense man who'd treated me like a son since I was 19. I didn't give him all the details over the phone. I just told him Amber had been unfaithful and that I needed his help to watch our daughter while I dealt with the fallout. He didn't even hesitate. He said, "Whatever you need, son." I felt a strange mix of heartbreak and grim determination. Part of me wanted to scream, to smash something, to confront her right then. But another part of me, maybe the part that had been humiliated for so long, wanted to see her squirm. I decided that when she came back from her fake spa weekend, I'd set the trap. The next day, while she was still gone, I packed a few bags for myself and our daughter. I booked a room at an extended stay hotel nearby, where we could have privacy and stability once everything came out. I spent hours drafting a long letter. It was part confrontation, part farewell, and part a record of every way she'd broken my trust. I wrote out the timeline of her lies. I included photos and copies of messages. I even printed them out and placed them in an envelope. By the time I finished, I felt hollow. When Amber finally came home Sunday evening, she looked completely relaxed. Hair freshly done, face glowing from whatever excuse she'd been living in. She hugged our daughter and acted like nothing had changed. I almost lost my composure watching her kiss our little girl goodnight. The hypocrisy made me feel sick. After our daughter was asleep, I told Amber I wanted to have a serious talk. She looked concerned and asked what was wrong. I said we should sit in the living room. She sat on the couch across from me, clutching a throw pillow like it was a shield. I took a deep breath and said, "I know about you and Tyler." Her eyes went wide. For a moment, she didn't say a word. Then she laughed, like she thought I was joking. But when she saw my face, the the color drained from hers. "What? What are you talking about?" she stammered. I pulled out the envelope and handed it to her. She flipped it open, and I watched her expression change from confusion to horror as she realized exactly how much I knew. She tried to speak, but I held up my hand. "Number, you don't get to talk yet," I said, my voice shaking. "You've been lying to me for months, to our daughter, to everyone." Tears filled her eyes. "Please, let me explain." I shook my head. "I don't want your excuses. I just want you to know that it's over." She started crying, ugly, hiccuping sobs that would have broken my heart once. But now, I just felt empty. I told her I'd already spoken to a lawyer, that I'd already arranged a place for our daughter and me to stay, that I'd already decided there was no coming back from this. She begged me not to tell her family. She said it would destroy her parents. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "You destroyed this family, not me." Then I stood up, walked into our daughter's room, and sat in the dark beside her bed while Amber sobbed in the living room. I spent that whole night sitting on the floor of my daughter's room. I didn't sleep. I just watched her breathe and wondered how I was going to explain any of this to her one day. At dawn, I went into our bedroom. Amber was sitting on the edge of the bed, her eyes swollen from crying. She looked up at me like she wanted to say something, but I held up my hand again. "I'm taking her to my dad's place," I said quietly. "I don't want her here when we start sorting this out." She nodded, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't find words. I packed our daughter's clothes, her favorite stuffed animals, her school supplies. I moved mechanically like I was on autopilot. When our daughter woke up, I told her we were going to have a little adventure with Grandpa. She was excited, completely oblivious to the fact that her parents' marriage had just imploded. Amber tried to hug me as I carried the bags to the car, but I stepped around her. She started crying again, covering her face with her hands. I drove straight to my father-in-law's house. He was waiting on the porch when we pulled up. He hugged me and didn't ask any questions. He took our daughter inside and told me he'd keep her busy for the day. Once she was out of earshot, I finally told him everything. I showed him the evidence. He didn't try to defend her. He just closed his eyes and sighed. "I'm so sorry, son," he said quietly. I nodded. Neither of us knew what else to say. After I left their house, I went to meet my lawyer in person. We finalized the paperwork to start the divorce process. He explained what to expect, how Amber would be served, what kind of temporary custody arrangement would be put in place, how we'd freeze the joint accounts so she couldn't clean them out. By the time I got back to the house, Amber was sitting on the porch steps waiting for me. She looked small and defeated. She stood up when I got out of the car. "Can we please talk?" she asked. I didn't want to hear it, but I also knew I needed to get everything out, so I told her we could sit down, but that she shouldn't expect me to forgive her. We sat across from each other in the living room. She was shaking so badly I thought she might fall apart. "I don't even know where to start," she whispered. "Try the truth," I said. She started rambling about how it had started as an emotional affair, how she'd felt neglected, lonely, overwhelmed, how she hadn't planned for it to escalate. I asked her how many times she'd slept with him. She looked down at her hands and whispered, "I don't know." I lost count. That was the moment something inside me broke for good. "Did you ever think about what this would do to me? To our daughter?" I asked. She started sobbing again. "I know I ruined everything. I hate myself for it. I was so stupid. I wish I could take it back." But no apology could erase what she'd done. I told her I was filing for divorce, that I'd already set things in motion, that she needed to find somewhere else to stay because the house would likely be sold as part of the settlement. She looked like she'd been slapped. "Where am I supposed to go?" she cried. "That's not my problem anymore," I said. She tried to come over and hug me, but I stepped back. "You made your choice," I told her. "Now you can live with it." After that, I packed a bag for myself and went to stay at the hotel I'd reserved. I needed space away from her. I needed time to process what my life had become. The next few days were a blur of phone calls with lawyers, financial advisors, and family. Word spread quickly. Her parents were devastated. Our friends were shocked. Some people reached out to ask if there was any chance we'd reconcile, but I told them there wasn't. Amber tried texting me almost every day. Long messages about how sorry she was, how much she loved me, how she was willing to do anything to fix this. I didn't reply. Meanwhile, Tyler tried to call me twice. I let it go to voicemail. I had nothing to say to him either. One evening, about a week later, Amber showed up at my hotel. She looked exhausted and broken. "I know you hate me," she said, standing in the doorway, "but please, just give me 5 minutes." I almost told her to leave, but curiosity, maybe morbid curiosity, made me step aside and let her in. Amber stepped into my hotel room like she was afraid the floor might collapse under her feet. She looked so different from the woman I used to love. Hair disheveled, eyes raw from crying, hands trembling as she clutched a tissue. I stood by the window, arms crossed, waiting. She cleared her throat. I just needed to see you. In person." I didn't say anything. She swallowed hard. "I know there's nothing I can say that will fix this, but I need you to understand how sorry I am." "Sorry you did it, or sorry you got caught?" I asked flatly. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. "You lied to me for almost a year," I went on, my voice quiet but shaking. "You looked me in the eye and told me you were at the gym. You came home to our daughter smelling like another man." "I know," she whispered, tears running down her face. "I hate myself." I didn't feel any satisfaction seeing her cry. If anything, it made me angrier. She'd already destroyed everything, and now she wanted sympathy. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said. "I don't even expect you to believe me when I say I never stopped loving you. But it's the truth." "Your actions say otherwise," I snapped. She nodded miserably. I know I've lost you. I need you to know it wasn't all a lie." For a long moment, the only sound was the humming of the heater. Then she looked up, her eyes desperate. "Please don't make this uglier than it has to be. We have a daughter. I don't want her to grow up hating me." I closed my eyes and took a slow breath. "I'm not going to poison her against you," I said finally. "But when she's old enough to ask why her parents aren't together, I will tell her the truth." She covered her face and sobbed into her hands. "I wish I could go back," she choked out. "I wish I could undo everything." "But you can't," I said quietly, "and I'm done sacrificing my dignity for someone who didn't care enough to be honest." After a minute, she wiped her eyes and looked at me, defeated. "What happens now?" she asked in a small voice. "You find somewhere else to stay," I said. "I'm keeping the house until we sort out custody and property division. My lawyer has already filed." She nodded, silent tears still streaming. "I never wanted this," she whispered. I almost laughed. "You sure worked hard for it." She flinched. After that, there wasn't much else to say. She turned and walked to the door. For a moment, she looked back at me like she was hoping for one last chance. But I just stood there. When she left, I finally sat down. My hands were shaking, and I realized I'd been holding my breath the entire time. Later that night, she texted me a long message about how she would stay with a coworker until she could figure out a place of her own. She said she hoped, someday, I'd find it in my heart to forgive her. I didn't reply. Over the next few days, I focused on our daughter and tried to keep her routine as normal as possible. I explained in simple terms that Mommy needed to stay somewhere else for a while. She cried and asked why. I told her it wasn't her fault and that both of us loved her very much. Meanwhile, Amber kept trying to contact me, calls, texts, emails. She even tried to have her mother reach out and plead her case. But I refused to see her. It wasn't about punishing her anymore. It was about protecting what little was left of my peace of mind. A few weeks passed in a haze of paperwork, custody schedules, and awkward handoffs. Every time Amber came to pick up our daughter, she looked like she'd aged 10 years. Her eyes were always swollen, her voice hushed and timid. I tried not to look at her more than I had to. It wasn't about cruelty. I just couldn't stand the way she'd start to tear up every time our eyes met, as if I was supposed to reassure her that everything would be okay. Tyler, for his part, disappeared. I later heard he'd taken an indefinite leave of absence from work. Apparently, some mutual friends had found out about the affair and started to cut him off. One of them texted me an apology for ever defending him. I didn't reply to that either. One night after Amber dropped off our daughter, she lingered in the doorway. I was about to close the door when she spoke. "Can we please just talk for a minute?" she asked. I almost told her no. But something in her face, maybe desperation, maybe guilt, made me step aside and let her in. She stood in the entryway, wringing her hands. "I've been seeing a therapist," she said. "I'm trying to figure out why I did this, why I sabotaged the only good thing in my life." I stayed silent. "I don't expect you to care," she went on, her voice cracking. "But I want you to know I'm trying to be a better person. For our daughter. For myself." I nodded, though I didn't really have anything to say. She looked up at me, her eyes full of tears. "I know you'll never believe this, but I still love you." Something about that sentence made my chest tighten. Not because I believed it, but because I realized how much it didn't matter anymore. Whatever love we'd had was dead. "I'm glad you're getting help," I said finally. "But nothing you say is going to change what happened." "I know," she whispered. There was a long, heavy silence. Then she wiped her eyes and nodded. "I'll go," she said quietly. After she left, I sat down on the couch and felt the strangest combination of grief and relief. Grief for the life I thought we'd have together, and relief that I didn't have to pretend anymore. A few days later, I met with my lawyer again. We finalized the terms of the temporary custody agreement. I would have primary custody during the week, and Amber would have weekends. We'd revisit the arrangement after a few months. The day we both signed the papers, Amber didn't say a word. She just kept her eyes on the table. When it was over, she walked out without looking back. It should have felt like closure. But the truth is, it felt hollow. That evening, after our daughter went to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen and read back through some of the messages Amber had sent Tyler. I'm not sure why I did it. Maybe I was trying to torture myself. Maybe I was trying to remind myself that I hadn't overreacted, that I wasn't throwing away a marriage over nothing. One message stuck with me. "I feel alive with you in a way I never have before." I closed my eyes and let out a shaky breath. In that moment, I realized I could spend the rest of my life replaying every lie and every betrayal, or I could start figuring out how to move on. I shut off my phone, closed my laptop, and poured the last of the whiskey into a glass. I raised it in the empty kitchen and whispered, "To the end." I drank it down, set the glass in the sink, and finally felt like I could start to let go. The weeks after signing the papers were strangely quiet. For the first time in years, there was no pretense, no forced small talk, no tiptoeing around each other, just me, my daughter, and the routines we built together. I won't pretend it was easy. There were nights when the loneliness pressed so heavy on my chest I could barely breathe. Nights when I woke up reaching for her out of habit, only to remember she was gone. But little by little, it got better. I started cooking again. Not just throwing something together because it was my turn, but actually cooking. Finding recipes, trying new things, taking pride in it. Our daughter loved being my little helper, standing on a chair so she could stir the pot or sprinkle cheese over a casserole. Some nights, after she went to bed, I'd go sit out on the porch with a cup of coffee and just watch the sky. It was the first time in a long time I felt like I could hear my own thoughts without the constant background noise of suspicion. Amber still texted sometimes. Updates about our daughter, questions about the divorce process, the occasional message that strayed into personal territory. I never ignored anything related to parenting, but I kept my replies short and neutral. A month after she moved out, she asked if I'd be willing to meet her for coffee to talk like adults. I agreed, partly out of curiosity, partly because I wanted to feel sure there was truly nothing left between us. We met at a small cafe near the courthouse. She looked tired, her hair pulled back, no makeup. For the first time, she didn't look like the woman who'd once captivated me. She just looked sad. She stirred her coffee for a long time before she spoke. "I know I've said it 100 times, but I'm sorry," she began, her voice low. "I can't take any of it back, but I needed you to hear it again." I nodded, but didn't answer. She went on. "Tyler and we're not speaking anymore. We haven't since everything came out." I looked up at her, searching her face. "I ended it," she said quietly. "I realized it was just an escape, a fantasy. It was never worth what it cost." "Then why did you keep doing it?" I asked, genuinely wanting to understand. She sighed, blinking back tears. "Because I was selfish. Because I didn't want to admit how unhappy I was or how much damage I was doing. I told myself it wasn't that serious, that I could handle it. But it was a lie." I studied her for a long moment. "I appreciate you telling me, but it doesn't change anything." "I know," she whispered. She set her coffee cup down and looked me in the eye. "You were a good husband. You deserved better." I didn't have the energy to argue. When we finally stood up to leave, she reached out and touched my arm. Someday, I hope you find someone who makes you feel loved again. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. After that meeting, something shifted in me. Maybe hearing her admit it out loud gave me permission to finally start moving on. I deleted our old photos from my phone. I boxed up the wedding album and the souvenirs from anniversaries that no longer meant anything. I started going to therapy myself. I thought it would be humiliating, but it was actually a relief to talk to someone who didn't have any stake in what had happened. My therapist told me that healing wasn't linear, that some days would feel worse than others, and that was okay. And she was right. Some days I'd wake up feeling hopeful. Other days, I'd see a photo of us together and feel like the wind had been knocked out of me. But slowly, the good days started to outnumber the bad. I spent more time with friends I'd neglected. I took my daughter on weekend trips to the zoo, to the park, to little diners she thought were fancy because they had paper menus. I started to feel like myself again. And for the first time in a long time, I realized that even though Amber had betrayed me, she hadn't destroyed me. Spring came, and with it, a sense of renewal I hadn't expected. The divorce was finalized in March. There was no courtroom drama, just paperwork, signatures, and the official end of nearly a decade together. Amber cried when the judge signed the decree. I didn't. I felt oddly calm, like a weight I'd carried for too long had finally been set down. We settled on a shared custody schedule that gave me the majority of the weekdays and alternating weekends. She moved into a small apartment about 15 minutes away. The first time I dropped our daughter off there, it felt surreal. Amber greeted us at the door trying to look cheerful. The space was sparsely decorated, just a couch, a table, and a few framed pictures of our daughter. When I left, my daughter ran back to hug me a second time. I hugged her tight and promised her everything would be okay. Driving away, I didn't feel anger anymore, just sadness for what could have been, and relief that I didn't have to live in a lie. Over the next few months, Amber and I settled into a fragile truce. We communicated only about our daughter. Sometimes we'd have short, polite conversations at drop-off, but they never went deeper than the basics. Every now and then, she'd slip and say something wistful. "You look good," or "I miss talking to you." I never encouraged it. I knew she was seeing a counselor. Occasionally, mutual friends would mention she seemed regretful and lost. Part of me felt sorry for her, but another part knew pity wouldn't do either of us any good. One evening, after putting my daughter to bed, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee and thought about everything that had happened. I thought about the man I'd been a year ago. Trusting. Maybe too trusting. I thought about the months I spent collecting evidence, the hours lying awake trying to figure out what I'd done wrong, and I realized that I hadn't failed her. She'd failed herself. No amount of self-blame would ever change that. It took me a long time to accept that you can love someone with everything you have and still be betrayed. It doesn't mean you weren't enough. It just means they weren't capable of valuing what they had. I started writing again. Nothing fancy, just journaling late at night. It helped me process the anger and grief in a way nothing else could. Eventually, I even began to consider that maybe, someday, I'd meet someone else. Someone who would choose honesty over convenience, commitment over impulse. But there was no rush. I focused on my daughter, on rebuilding my life, on remembering who I was before the lies. People sometimes ask if I regret not confronting Amber sooner, if I regret gathering evidence and planning my exit instead of blowing up her world the minute I found out. The truth is, I don't regret any of it. I needed time to see things clearly. I needed to understand that her affair wasn't my failure, but her choice. I needed to protect my daughter's future and my own peace of mind. When you discover betrayal that deep, you realize closure isn't something anyone can give you. It's something you create for yourself. The last time Amber tried to talk about reconciliation was a rainy afternoon when she came to pick up our daughter. She stood in the doorway, clutching her umbrella, and said, "I still think about us. I still love you." I looked at her, really looked, and felt nothing but gratitude that the chapter was over. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said calmly. She nodded, tears filling her eyes, and walked back to her car. I closed the door behind her, turned to my daughter, and smiled. "Ready for movie night?" I asked. She cheered and ran to the couch, clutching her stuffed unicorn. I realized then that no matter how much had been taken from me, I still had everything that mattered most. And in that moment, I knew I was finally free. Thank you for listening to this powerful story of betrayal, heartbreak, and ultimately, healing. If you enjoyed this narration, please consider subscribing for more true and inspired stories about relationships, revenge, and personal transformation. What would you have done in his situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this one, don't forget to like the video and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Until next time, thanks for tuning in, and remember, sometimes the end of one chapter is just the beginning of something better.